We're going to go ahead and get started. We have Melissa with us. Melissa Silverman.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to, what is this? This is part 4 of our virtual series, isn't it?
This is part 4 of our virtual series. Absolutely. So Melissa is the chapter president for LA EPI chapter, and Joe is the president for the Orange County and the San Diego. So this is a collaborative of all of the Southern California chapters, or what there was at the time when we started this. There's a couple more now, I think. Southern California chapters getting together to do business forums, because we can't do them live, so we're doing them virtually. So Melissa, do you want to talk to that a little bit, and I'll go ahead and share my screen while you're doing that?
Sure. So, you know, this has been something that we've been doing all year. This is the second part. We started this when we all got locked down initially. We started doing these since we couldn't get together like we usually do and have a business owner event for business owners in person. We wanted to be able to bring it to them virtually. And so we started it back in May? And we wanted to talk about the topics that were of importance to everybody at that time. And so we had 3 topics that we were talking about that were, you know, focused on the PPP loans and, you know, how do you keep your employees safe? And when we started to open up, how do you bring back employees safely to the workplace? And that was kind of our beginning part. And then we actually polled all of the business owners to see, what did you want to learn more about? And based upon the feedback that they shared with us, we came up with part 2 of the series. And this is actually the last of the 4-part series that we're doing that's really focused on the topics that everyone wanted to learn more about. So today's topic is going to be talking about entrepreneurs and family businesses. How do you prevail in these uncertain times?
So there's Melissa and Joe. This is the family of companies that we have outside of EPI. And the reason that we have this here is not for promotion, but to think about where we're coming from as we present and put on these events. So Southern California Institute is the educational platform, and that's what allows us to have the digital presence that we do and to roll out the programming, because we do about 250 events a year. But for us, it's really about creating a community. The other 2 that I'll talk about, I'll let Melissa do Avenue M. Trederi Mancini is a law firm that mainly works with families, high net worth families, on resolving messes, getting to the heart of highly relevant matters in the areas that you see there: integrated tax and estate planning, business, succession, family governance counseling. And then the Founders Group is a firm that we own in partnership with Melissa. You can see there behind her head, the Founders Group. It's a collaborative of different professionals coming together to provide a process to take business owners through to determine what they might want to do with their company. Do they want to keep it and grow it? Do they want to sell it? And if they do want to transition, if, when, how much, and to whom. And so that's just our bent as we're talking through. Melissa, you want to tell us a little bit about what Avenue M does? That's what you're going to talk about today too, I think.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about valuation, but Avenue M Advisors is a business valuation company that works with business owners and successful families and entrepreneurs, helping them understand what the value of the business is so that they can decide what they're doing with it and any assets that they have. So
lots of different opportunities. And Trey Fairman is our other presenter for today. Trey, do you want to tell us quickly about Waypoint?
Sure. Waypoint Retirement Advisors is my firm. I'm a tax attorney by training. I have a master's in tax law. I tripped around working in most of the major Wall Street firms and private banks for the last 25 years. And as the world has evolved, tax law has changed. I've migrated from a high net worth estate tax planner to more of an income tax planner. working with business owners. So today I'm talking about qualified plans and how they fit into the sale of a business.
Perfect. So thanks, Trey. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for always saying yes to us. These are the topics. This is the flyer that we had used. As Melissa said, this is the fourth in this 4-part series. I'm sure we'll do it again next year, but this is the last one for this year, as it is with most of our programming, because we don't do December. And guess what? Next week is the last week of November already. So I know, it's crazy. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about determining how your business value has been affected. As Trey said, he's going to talk about qualified plan strategies as they relate to succession planning. And then Joe or myself or both of us together are going to do the family business conflict and governance conversation. So that's the goal for today. This is Melissa's bio.
We can skip over that.
And her beautiful picture. And there's Trey's. He just told you what he does. Here's Joe's. Everybody knows Joe pretty well, I think. Our 4 companies. So here we are. So we're going to go through these topics, and then we'll have a little time for question and answer in between. But if you have questions, obviously feel free to type them in the chat function, and we'll try to get to them as soon as we can. But other than that, Melissa, I'll drive. You tell me when you want me to switch slides.
Okay, perfect. So today, here's the agenda that we're going to talk about. Hopefully, we're going to talk about it in a little bit different way. So you can see that there's a few different topics. We're going to talk mostly about valuation, but then we're going to talk about succession planning and exit planning in this current environment. So let's go to the next page, slide, whatever you want to call it. So what has happened to companies' values in this COVID economic environment that we've been in? You know, we've seen that the world has changed greatly. We've gone from a period at the beginning of the year where a lot of us were shut down and we're doing business from our home, if we were doing business at all. For many businesses, they were just shut down and couldn't do any business. For other businesses, they were able to really uncover opportunities and really take advantage of the business environment. We opened back up. A lot of us started to open back up, you know, as the months went on, and we're able to start really doing business. And now we're getting into an environment again where we're about to shut down again, and things could get very, very difficult for business owners. And so, you know, it's really been about navigating this market and figuring out, how do you survive, or how do you maintain your business in this kind of just a tumultuous business environment. And, you know, we've seen a number of businesses that have gone under and have just closed their doors and said that they can't continue in this kind of an environment. And then we've had others that have just blown it out of the park. It's really been that crazy a scenario, what we've been dealing with. We've seen different sectors have done, you know, some have done really, really well, and then others have not done well. So we always talk about, you know, it really depends on what the purpose and the use of the valuation is all about. This year has been crazy. I will just tell you that. We've had an election year, and we've had a situation where the markets have been very, you know, the interest rates have been very low. Everything's been really on that low end. But we've had a political environment that has just been very, very, what's the right word? It's been all over the place.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I said tumultuous.
Well, tumultuous is one word, but it's just been difficult. And as a result of it, we've had more people coming out to do planning, whether it be succession planning or exit planning, or trying to figure out how do they do something with their business by the end of the year. Because based upon who got elected, they just saw very different scenarios, and they wanted to be able to take advantage of what was in the current environment. So we have seen that happen. Now we're in a situation right now where we still don't know how the political arena is going to shake out, because there's still a number of elections that are going to have to go through a runoff process, which is not going to take place until January. And so we don't know whether we're going to be in a situation come the beginning of next year where we're going to have divided government, or are we going to have, is the same party going to be in control of both houses? And that makes planning very, very, people are very unsure and very just unsure of what to do. And so that has caused a great amount of planning to go on. So the purpose and the use of the valuation from a business perspective is incredibly important right now, because that dictates what it is that's going to be done in that valuation. We've talked about this pandemic and how long it's going to last. We know it's going to last through next year. We don't know how much longer it's going to go on, but hopefully these vaccines are going to come out and hopefully they're going to work. But still, this has had a dramatic effect on some businesses. So let's go to the next slide and let's talk about what have we done and what are we doing right now from a valuation perspective in this environment. I'm going to skip over the market comparison approach for a minute and I'm going to talk about the income approach. This year, I've talked about how we've really had to look at discounted cash flow analyses, and we've really had to get projections from companies in order to do these business valuations. They've just been incredibly important, not from the perspective of just looking forward and saying, okay, what's the likelihood? How reasonable are these projections, and what's the likelihood that the business will meet those projections? But from the perspective of, we don't have historical data right now to use to value a company, because that historical data was when things were really good. And we're not in that environment right now. So for a lot of companies, it's how long is it going to take a company to get back to their baseline, which would have been last year in 2019. And so those projections now have to help us identify how long it will take them to get back to that point. For some companies, they've already done it. For other companies, it's going to take a couple years. And for other companies, it could take even longer than that. So that's how important these projections have become to the valuation process. We also have to look at, are the projections realistic? And we have to look at, we've been looking all year at what is the company's burn rate? How quickly have they been going through their cash situation? Because that's really impacting whether the company is paying back their loans, whether their loans will be forgiven, and what happens with, the other debt that the company might have in place. Asset valuation, we are looking at the asset approach right now, because it is a methodology that we can use in this environment. If I come back to the market approach, using the market approach right now, we're still looking at companies that are from 2019 and before. And the challenge with doing that is that we're looking at companies that were in a pre-COVID environment. And so business was really good. And so the multiples were really good on those companies. And so if you have a company that's not doing as well this year, to use those multiples and those numbers, those ratios, we're overvaluing the company. And so that's why we're talking so much about the discounted cash flow analysis and how important it has become to the valuation process. Discounts for lack of control and lack of marketability, incredibly important right now, because not only are there discounts because of the normal discounts that we typically take, because you might be a minority shareholder, you might not be able to make decisions for the business, you may not be able to transfer your shares as you want because there are restrictions around what you can do. There's no available market for your shares because you own a minority interest and it's a privately held company. But in addition to that, right now, there are discounts that we're taking because of the environment and the circumstances that we're in, because government has shut down effectively many, many companies, and you're not doing the kind of business that you have been doing in the past. The global and economic conditions for every company out there is in a very, very down sector or down economic environment. And so there are discounts that can be taken from these perspectives that allow us to maximize discounts right now. So that is, for some people that want to do planning, that's a very good thing. So if we go to the next slide, this just talks more about the market comps and how we have to be very careful what we're doing with market comps. What we are doing with market comps, or we are using them as a sanity check to make sure that the values look, from the different approaches that we're using, look right. Let's go to the next slide. So, you know, we've all seen that there has been a big impact on the CARES Act. I think that we've been in a situation now where companies have had, hopefully most companies have had enough time because of the extension that they are able to get most of that money forgiven. But that's something that in the valuation analysis, we have to do an extensive analysis on these loans and what's the company's ability or the probability that they're going to get these loans forgiven. And if not, we have to look at what's the impact to the company with these loans. So that's something that we really had to take into consideration. But in addition to that, we now are in a situation where a lot of companies have already gotten their PPP money, and they now need additional money, and there's no additional money that's available to them right now. And so we're going through that scenario right now with a lot of companies. What do they do now? How do they get that liquidity that they're really looking for to get them through these turbulent, tumultuous, I don't know, whatever you want to call these times that we're living through right now. So that's something that we've been dealing with. And whether or not they can get other financing, you know, for some companies it's available and for others it's not available. And you know, we're waiting for more stimulus money to come through, but nobody knows what's going to happen or when it's going to happen.
Well, and Melissa, on the other side of that, I've been seeing a lot of information about how should these companies now that have gotten the PPP loans that are going into transactions with deals, and how are those loans being handled versus, you know, on the buy side versus the sell side. And I know the SBA has been coming out with some rulings, and that's those loans are really going to start to affect deals in some ways as well.
Yeah, especially the higher the loan, the more likely it is that it's going to be impacted.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something that you definitely have to take advantage of, or not take advantage of, you have to consider and deal with as you're going through a transaction right now. No question. So let's go to the next slide. But there is a lot of positivity out there right now. We are seeing a tremendous amount of planning. I mean, the planning that's going on right now is equal to what we saw back in 2016. There's just, everybody's trying to take advantage of protecting assets, moving assets out of their state, moving business assets out. So there's a tremendous amount of planning. And so this is something you have to think about. If you're concerned about what happens next year with government, whether it's going to be a divided government or not, this is something that you want to, you know, if you're concerned about what happens with the tax rate, you know, there's a lot of unknowns right now. So it's a very good time to plan, but again, you have to get it done by the end of the year, and there's not a lot of time left. So again, there is a lot of, you can take advantage of lower values because we are in an environment right now where businesses are lower and you can get higher discounts because of the turbulent times that we're in. There's other types of valuations that you can do as well that will allow you to take advantage. You know, these stock incentive programs where you need to have a 409A valuation done. We're seeing very high discounts there as well. There have been a lot of companies that have taken advantage of doing acquisitions this year. And now we're seeing just a tremendous amount of transactions that business owners are trying to get transactions done by the end of the year. They are trying to take advantage of whatever they can if they're in the in a situation where they can benefit from it. So let's go to the next slide. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about succession planning in the current economy, because we're seeing a tremendous amount of succession planning and exit planning that is going on right now. I'm seeing a lot of different things. I'm seeing business owners that are planning today, not just for right now, but they're planning for the foreseeable future. They're planning for 3 to 5 years out. They know that they want to sell their business, or they want to transition their business in the next 3 to 5 years, and they want to start working on that now. We're seeing that there's both opportunities and there's threats in the market that are causing business owners to start talking to advisors about how can we help them with the planning that they need to do for their business so that they're not behind they're not behind the ball, and they are able to either take advantage of the opportunities, or they're really threatened by some things and they want to make sure that they do something before it occurs. That's one of the things that we're seeing a lot of. As I said, the election has caused a tremendous amount of planning to occur, and that's been going on for, I'd say, the last 3-4 months. We've seen that the amount of planning that's been happening. And then one new thing that we're seeing, and maybe this isn't new, but we're seeing a lot of unexpected deaths that have occurred. And we're seeing that the spouses and the families are coming out, and they're trying to plan and figure out, what do they do with the business? What do they do with the business before they lose the value? Or maybe they haven't been in the business, and they have people that are running the business and they don't really know what's going on in the business, but yet they're responsible for it. So there's a lot of planning that's starting to occur from that perspective as well. What I would say to everybody is, don't wait until something happens. We're in an environment right now where anything can happen. We just don't know. So if you have a business and your business is doing really well, and you're thinking, in the next 5 or 6 or 10 years that you want to do it, don't wait until you're a year into it, or until you have a year left. Start the planning process now, because you just never know when something's going to happen, and you don't want to leave your spouse or your family in a situation where they don't know what to do and they start scrambling to try and figure out what to do. Be proactive and get yourself into a position where you and your business are ready for anything that might occur, so that your family and you have options. That's what I would tell you. That's just my personal opinion. So with that, I'm going to open it up if anybody has any questions for me.
Perfect. I may have opened a can of worms. Melissa, we have a question about elaborating on how a PPP loan will be handled in a sale. And I don't know that that's necessarily, we're spun up on that, but can you address that at all?
I can't address that specifically. Do we have any investment bankers on the phone or on the call? I would defer to them as to how it is being handled from a transaction perspective. Is there anybody on that wants to address it? If not, I will get you an answer.
Melissa, this is Randy Miller. I had a client who was in a sales transaction, and it was part of a roll-up where the buyer was buying several companies. And for all the companies, they were doing a holdback on the PPP loan until it was settled by the SBA. And our bank had told us that would be sometime February next year.
Okay. All right.
So so Fox Rothschild came out with an event that's going through all of the details of this. Wayne, I could probably get you the information of the recording on that. I also scheduled for one of our EPI chapter meetings, but I think it's not until was doing the beginning of the year with Rose Sorensen, who's a transactional attorney handling deal flow that's an expert on this as well. So while I'm not up to speed, actually, Joe wasn't here, you could probably answer that. So maybe we'll ask Joe if he knows the answer to that when we get him back in here.
But thanks, Randy, for the input. That was really helpful.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for Melissa?
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, ma'am. Oops. Okay, Trey, you are up, sir. Understanding qualified plan strategies, and he's a man of little words or bullets or slides. One slide.
Well, so full disclosure, I normally do this sort of talk with a couple other friends and partners. So I'm gonna get through this. Feel free to fire away with questions. We definitely have a lot of smart people on the call here, so we can go from there. So, I'm going to talk about a qualified plan, how that fits into succession planning. But I think what is important to understand is that it really helps in multiple steps along the way. Okay, so keep that in mind. And with many things in life, it's always good to start earlier than late. And, let me kind of first frame what a retirement plan structure that I'm chatting about. So what I'm referring to is not only your kind of boilerplate 401k profit sharing plan that allows you to max out at 57,000 this year. But I'm really talking about using what I'm going to call a high deductible plan that has a couple extra buckets on it. So we've got the 401k, the profit sharing, a cash balance bucket, and then possibly a 401h bucket, which is like a healthcare savings account, but allows you to put a lot more in. Okay, so again, not just a plain vanilla cookie cutter generic safe harbor 401k. Okay, so I think as Melissa chatted about, this kind of fits and works really well when we're doing forward-looking planning. As with many things in life, if you have a client that shows up that says, hey, I just sold my business, I used the seller's attorney, it was all a stock sale transaction, and the money's being wired in today, help me do some tax planning. This probably doesn't work so hot for that. Okay. So, who is that laughing? Was that you, Shelley?
That was me. Because that definitely happens.
Yeah, as those people walking in. Okay. So I think what I'm going to, start with first is just kind of summarizing. So again, this is going to help in multiple parts. It's going to help you when you clean up the books, right? Which is the first part of this whole exit planning path that we walk down. It's going to help with employee retention. It's going to help with the tax burden when you actually sell. And then it's also flexible enough that if you choose not to sell, it still works out well for you also. Okay, so let's kind of see how that works. I want to first start with this survey that Shelley did, which Shelley, I think you gave that out to everybody maybe when you did it, right? But maybe not. So I will tell you that I'm not fudging the results, but I will tell you that in the survey, understanding qualified plan strategies, only 29% of people wanted to learn about that. However, much like a backdoor Roth, we're backdooring into this chat because 79% of people wanted to learn about business succession planning, and 68% of people were concerned about taxes. So this fits right into that little wheelhouse. Okay, so as many of you may know, when you sell a business, I've sold one or two and bought a few. There's always this conversation about if the gains are going to be taxed as ordinary income and or long-term capital gains. So my quick little headline here about ice cream, there's a great case, which hopefully many of you have heard about, Martin Ice Cream. Okay, so Martin Ice Cream back in 1998 sort of talked about this whole exercise. And I think why this is important, at least why I wanted to kind of start here, is that clearly, if you are able to sell your business and get all long-term cap gains rates, I think that's a pretty good result. Now, interestingly enough, I had a call this morning from a colleague that saw that I was chatting and wanted to know how we do one of these exit strategies where it's all capital gains and we defer paying the tax on that as well. I don't necessarily have an answer for that. In my mind, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. I think if you can make it all long-term cap gains, that sounds pretty good to me. All right, so again, Martin Ice Cream sort of tells us, look, if and when you sell a business, we're all going to haggle over whether we're selling goodwill, whether we're selling furniture, whether we're selling IP, and then tax results of that are going to be ordinary income and or long-term capital gains. So again, first part of this, what do we always do? We sort of hire someone like Melissa, brings in her team, kind of looks at everything and then in effect right sizes the expenses, cleans up the books, which in plain English, what does that mean? It means expenses go down, then income goes up. Okay, so why does this structure work for us? So again, a plain vanilla 401k profit sharing lets us put away $57,000. Depending on your age and your income, I'm just going to pick someone age 50. They can cap out at about $225,000 per year. Okay, and they can also make up for past service, so we can bump that up. And then we could also maybe split the plan year, so we don't only get 225 in the first year, maybe we get double that amount. Okay, so first and foremost, before we even think about selling the business, we're going to clean up the books. That's going to drive expenses down, going to drive taxable income up. So from an owner's perspective, he or she's trying to shelter income. This fits perfectly for that. Secondly, without the cash balance part, you still have a profit sharing component, right? But profit sharing components are great to incentivize employees that are obviously doing well, that you would like to stay on board as you clean up the books and then transition over the next 3 to 5 years before you sell it. So it works for those two things, okay, before we even get to the kind of the really good stuff. And I'm glad Joe's back. Hey, Joe. So I'm going to credit this to Joe, but he maybe borrowed it from somebody else. But Joe has said to me on a few occasions, you know, Trey, business planning's not that complicated, which I always chuckle. And I'm like, all right, here it comes. And he says, you know what? At the end of the day, it boils down to whether I, as the owner, am going to keep and grow my business or transition it. And if I'm going to transition it, do I transition to my family via a sale or a gift, to my internal team at work via a sale, or to an external group via a sale? And if I do to transition, do I do it in whole or in part? Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on here, right? So that's why my third bullet point is let's remain flexible. Okay, so there's really no downside to upgrading your qualified plan offering from a boilerplate 401k with a profit sharing to a cash balance 401h plan. You're going to, in plain English, be able to put away 5 to 10 times more as an owner pre-tax. Okay. So again, start early, remain flexible, have options. So let's just look at 2 quick examples. I was told to be brief. Normally, I'd probably bore everyone with a bunch of numbers here, but let's just talk in theory what we're doing. So selling 100% of the business. Again, let's not talk about stock sales. That's not what we're doing here. This is an asset sale. And again, the reason that's important, obviously, is the stock sale helps the seller because they get all cap gains. That's not so great for a buyer. So at least in my experience, all the transactions I've been in have always been asset sales because the buyer then can depreciate assets moving forward. So after the sale, if that owner still has an entity, he or she has probably a couple assets, right? Has a down payment and then probably has a note. Okay. So if you think about what we just talked about, we went and let's assume this owner implemented what we had chatted about. Okay, 2 or 3 years before a sale. He's making about $200,000 a year. I'm just going to read through just a simple little fact pattern. Okay, so in 2015, he sets up his cash balance / high deductible plan. Okay, in the past, he was just putting away the maximum $57,000. He then can contribute more himself in the few years ramping up before his sale. All right, let's assume then that in 2018, he sells his business. When he sells his business, he obviously is not having any, income from working, though he may be retained for an earn-out or a consultant. He does still have that operating entity. Okay, so if he has employees, it would then be assumed that NewCo that purchased the business, bought the assets, all of those employees go over to NewCo. They roll whatever plan assets they have to NewCo's 401k. But now we have an owner with a entity that can now contribute, depending on his age, using my example, $250,000 per year of those sale proceeds into his or her cash balance high deductible account. So we don't have any ordinary income on that tax. Now, again, if they're getting cap gains on all that stuff, my argument would be just pay the cap gains. That's great. Okay. But clearly, as a tool to defer ordinary income, we have that limit of $250,000. Now, we also, if we go back, he or she probably has service credits, so we can put more than that in. Okay. So again, that's an easy way, I think, to defer paying ordinary income on that sale. Okay. Now, that's if we're going to sell all of it. That's a good example. It's plain simple. Let's talk about if we're going to sell a portion of it. I think maybe the best concept of this, I'm sure people here have good examples, but I'm going to use one that I think you probably see more often than not. Older attorneys, I don't know if I want to pick on Joe, but let's say older accounting firms, right? They have a couple old partners and they have some up and coming young CPAs that need to buy into the business, right? So if you have, let's say, 2 older partners, only one of them wants to retire, how do we do that? Okay, so again, high deductible plan should be there beforehand. Okay, let's assume the partner retiring, selling his or her interest for $500,000. That new young CPA probably doesn't make anywhere near $500,000, and using plain simple math, would probably have to earn double that amount in the state of California, earn $1 million, pay tax to net the 500 to buy the interest from the older owner. Option 2, he or she could go out and borrow money from a bank. Okay, make that transaction that way. But what if we then set up a installment purchase where it's agreed that the retiring owner, again, not leaving today, leaving in 3 to 5 years, will over a period of time, much like we would structure a installment sale, transition ownership in the business outside of the qualified plan. So this is not passing through the qualified plan, because keep in mind that if a defined benefit plan has more than 10% of employer stock, it is a ESOP plan. So that gets into a whole nother level. Okay. So shares are going outside from retiring owner to young up and coming owner. And the young CPA is, as opposed to making installment purchases to the owner, to the old owner, which would be taxable income and after tax money, the new up and coming CPA are making contributions to the qualified plan account for the retiring owner. Okay, so then what we have over time is we have ownership going to the younger CPA, money going to the old CPA. However, the money going to the old CPA is pre-tax money, right? It's deductible by that young CPA. It's payable over a period of time. And it allows the owner then to, in effect, supercharge or superfund the qualified plan so that in year 3 or 5, when they then retire, they can roll the balance from that cash balance plan into their own IRA and start pulling the money out of that. So again, that's a way for them to defer ordinary income on the sale of the business right up front. Okay. All right. So again, and I think if you do a little bit of research, this is not a rocket science concept. It's been out there. I would tell you that you don't hear about it very often. I work with a firm that, they're clearly not doing 300 of these every day, but, over the past 10 years have maybe done 5 to 10 to 12 or 15. Okay. So it's out there. I think if you think about that second scenario and maybe even the first one, as there are a lot of professional service firms that are transitioning, trying to figure out, how do I get, younger upstart employees / wannabe owners, how do I make this affordable for them in a lending environment that's probably a little bit challenging? Okay, so again, a high deductible plan, which is no more complicated than a 401k profit sharing with a cash balance bucket on it, allows you to contribute, again, varied by age and income, $250,000 to $300,000 per year. We may be able to double that. So for the sale of a business, that seems to be a pretty good receptacle for that person to then receive that money pre-tax, allow it to compound tax deferred, roll it out to an IRA when they then choose to leave 3 to 5 years down the road. Okay, so again, it works really well because A, it's flexible. Okay, as we're cleaning up the books, driving down expenses, it's going to help right away. It's also going to help keep key employees, with us, because we can contribute profit sharing for them. And then depending on what happens long term, I don't know the stats, somebody probably does here, but they may be on that runway to sell it, and at the end of the day, they may say, you know what, change my mind, I'm going to keep it. This still works. Okay, whatever money they've put into that plan for themselves before that sales transaction happens, they still get to keep that money. Okay, so that's my 15 minutes and 37 seconds on a super simple concept.
Hey, you went over.
Yeah, I know,
told you-
sorry.
I told
Well,
you
Melissa
15
got
minutes.
doubled, so I 37 seconds more.
Awesome. Thanks, Trey. As usual, great ideas. If anybody has questions for Trey, go ahead and chat, put them in the chat function. And Trey, will you be on for a little bit to check those out if people have questions?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to stay here.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
I need to rest.
So we've got another 15 minutes. Speaking of, at the beginning, we were talking about, the environment that we're in and lots of issues around the business itself. But we know that when there are issues inside the business, there's a lot of family conflict usually happening as well, right?
Very much so.
So one of the things that that we love doing inside of Struzari Mancini is helping families and family businesses with that conflict, helping them become more aligned amongst themselves before they try to move forward with their planning. So that's what Joe is going to talk about today. Oh, sorry, it's going crazy on me. Sorry, hang on.
It's okay, I'll use this instead of that. That's okay.
Oh, 1, 2, 4. There we go.
Cool. For those of you who have been kind enough to text me kind wishes for mom, thank you very much. At this point, as you know, you can't go into hospitals. She's resting and will figure stuff out over a period of time, and lots of doctors that know her well are all over at the moment. So, and it's hell not being able to go see her, but it's the way life works at the moment. We'll talk about our Compassion Platform governance, both traditional and non-traditional, and a review of that. Do you need to click on it? So a premise from us. Most families that come to see us that are in a conflict situation, so pictures families in conflict of wealth, or families with businesses, and there's conflict about how to run the business, or the family members in or outside of it. Most of the time, the family is blaming what's going on now for the problem. And the dominoes were set up a long time beforehand. Way before the family saw some sort of a opportunity or problem. And they ended up saying, you know what, let's go seek advisors to figure that out. They sought counsel, and they created what we call tools for rules. Operating agreements, buy-sell agreements, LLC, C Corps, whatever, and or other things around it. At that time, those dominoes were set up for a disagreement. Because when they ran into a disagreement, somebody read documents, they said, oh, this is how we're supposed to fight. And inside a fight, that anticipation of conflict created more. There was a way instead to create those documents to find some alignment for them. So many times we get to say, it's okay, take a breath. It's not what's going on now. You were set up for this problem a long time ago.
And do they often have the opinion that they can't change what they already had in place?
Yes, they always do.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you're a family and everybody agrees, you can change whatever it is. There might be some landmines you got to avoid or some wires that you've got to cross without tripping them, but sure. So on traditional governance, one of the first things to notice in the family system is, who are you in the system? Are you a business owner? Are you a business owner are you the owner in the business and in the family? You're a 7. Are you an owner, but you're not part of the family or the business? You're just receiving equity because you got it and you're already out of it? Are you in the business and an owner, but you're not part of the family? Or are you, and vice versa, all the way through? So what you're seeing here is, once you realize what that is, you could talk about expectations. This is a list of those exact things that we just talked about. Beyond that, there's a structure called a family council for larger families with businesses. Many of you are very familiar with the CEO that runs a company, and the board of directors right above them, and a shareholders agreement that says who's allowed to tell the board of directors what to do. In this diagram, the family assembly is everybody within the family: in-laws, outlaws, kids, and everybody else. The family council just happens to be the subgroup that they decide that should interact with the shareholders to give direction and to start to look at what would make sense for transparency. So just a structure to be able to do that, to lessen the conflict. Thank you. Sorry about that. So they start out by creating values and a creed that goes down to further documents like a county constitution that encapsulates not tools for rules on how to fight, but tools for alignment of how to get there. Does it take a lot to counsel to families like this? Yes. Inside of that, I'll let you continue when I talk to the doctor. Sorry.
It's okay.
Just sorry. Hey,
So, perfect timing, huh? Okay, so the traditional governance that Joe is talking about right now, this is generally what we're doing with families and what you might consider the typical documents that get put in place around family governance. So looking for rules, they're looking for guiding principles, and really the values and how you carry them throughout the family system as well as the next generations. So the family constitution is the document that's inclusive of everything that gets created for the family. So generally when we're working with a family, once we go through the alignment process and make sure that they're all on the same page, and we start to then work on these sort of documents, they'll do it in stages because this is a pretty massive undertaking to put together all these documents. So going through them in pieces and helping the family make choices is really what family governance is about, and helping them really narrow in on what are the most important things to us as a family, especially things like employment policies. You know, do you if you're in the family, do you automatically get to work in the family and get a high paying job, or do you have to start at the bottom and do the maintenance? Or do you have to go work somewhere else before you can come and work in the family? So there's this common decision of, are you a family first or a business first? Family business. You got to make that decision, and it guides a lot of these rules. So that's the Constitution. More documents. We're going to work on a genogram. We showed you that enterprise system. That's for people to identify with where they fit into the whole family enterprise. You'd be surprised how many families that come in to work with us are really, they're not considering where each person is in the enterprise, right? Are they, like that, are they a 7 or are they a 1? Are they only just one piece, or are they really affecting everything, the family, the business, and all of it, and ownership? So it continues through with getting all these documents down to setting up the board of advisors and the business descriptions and the organization charts and the roles and rules and responsibilities and the whole bit. This is just an outline of what a traditional governance process looks like for us. Oops, it took us through. Basically a lot of what I just said, but if you've ever worked with Sujay Mancini or the Founders Group, you know that we're extremely process oriented. So we don't do anything unless we have a process around it. And so this is the process, and it works oddly similarly to how we would do a legal plan, or what we would call wealth strategies design, where it starts with a review and a design of what the plans are for the family. So we're going to do some initial contact. We're going to spend a lot of time getting to know the family. We're going to do interviews with each family member who's going to participate in the family meeting, surveys and interviews. We're going to do some evaluation internally. And then when we go into that initial family retreat, we're going to have a good gauge on where the issues are, just like we would with the business. So sometimes it's all mixed up, right? The family and the business dynamic are two separate things, yet people are getting them confused. So trying to separate those and make sure that we're focused on the right issues throughout that retreat is super important. So spending the retreat on what we call the 9 key questions. What does your family do? What does your family really do? What does your family believe in? That's where you start to get to the core values and guiding principles, 'cause you're talking about the things that they believe in. How do they define success and how they measure success as a family? And so this is where a lot of the stuff starts to come out to say, hey, you know, I'm the mom of this family, and success for me is for my family to be together at holidays and not fight. Whereas, you know, oldest son, success for him is more money in his pocket. So, you know, going through the defining and measuring success really starts to bring out a lot of the issues. And then we talk about the strengths and weaknesses, the typical SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so we spend a day going through those questions. And by going through them, it really brings out where there's alignment and where there's misalignment. It's similar to what we do with a business that's not a family business, but when it's a family, you really are getting more into the family values side of things than just the business. So spending that retreat, and then the next day, being able to then start to zero in on, okay, we spent all this time together. We know what the issues are that we need to work on. And we also are able to identify and start to begin to draft action plans to work toward the council and the constitutions and the family values and the boards of directors and all those things. So that's kind of how the process works. For us, again, we would go back to a tradition of pre-governance. As Joe explained in the beginning, for us, governance is not as much about the documents that happen at the end, but about becoming aligned with the family and business before you create those documents. Because if we create those documents before there's alignment, we're only creating a set of rules to fight over. And so if you look at this, you know, this graph again, you realize that in the world of traditional governance, when you get to step 3, they're creating tools for rules, whereas in the Co-Passion platform, the pre-governance, we're creating tools for an aligned thought set that then has that family able to handle whatever comes up in the future, because they have thought set on how to work through issues, not just rules to follow and to fight over. So that's the pre-governance. We're not saying that the traditional documents are a bad thing. What we're saying is that spending the time to do a retreat up front to become aligned and then create the documents might be a better solution that arms the family with the tools that they need in the future as well. So that's a little bit about the difference between traditional governance and pre-governance. We do 2-day retreats, like I mentioned. That's how we help them come aligned. They can do it a basic 2-day retreat, or they can do an expanded. That just means there's more intake up front and more of a report spent on the end. So more questions? That was it for the governance side of things. We are right on time.
Shrey,
Yeah.
Someone had a question in the chat about a 401h plan. Do I have 2 minutes to talk about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so a 401h plan is just another bucket, right? So the way that I like to think about and explain qualified plans is you've got the 401k bucket, and then when that gets full, it cascades into the profit sharing bucket. And then when that gets full, it cascades into a cash balance bucket. And then you have another bucket called a 401h plan. So what a 401h plan is it is basically a healthcare savings account that money goes in pre-tax, right? And it grows tax-free. And if you use it for medical expenses in retirement, of which the list is pretty long, it comes out tax-free. You don't hear about it a lot because the pension actuaries need to do what's called a health actuarial study. If they're going to use that in their plans this year, basically what that means in plain English is if you have a 401h bucket, you can fill it up to about $594,000. So it's just another bucket to put more money into. And we often use that because there are some limits, right? So typically you can only contribute 20 to 25% of the cash balance contribution into the 401h. But as a for instance, and this is why we like to use actuaries, why the little button, you probably can't see that I love my actuary, because they can geek out and play with all the numbers, and they can do catch-up contributions into the 401h bucket that you can't do into the 401k or profit sharing bucket. So sometimes when we come in and sort of upgrade a plan, we're putting $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 extra into the 401h bucket. So again, pre-tax, gross tax-free, use it for healthcare expenses in retirement, comes out tax-free. And oh, by the way, if you don't use it all or you change your mind, you can shift it back into the cash balance bucket and then pull it out there. It would just be taxable. So that's what the 401h is.
Perfect.
Does anybody have any questions related to family governance for Shelley? If you do, either raise your hand or send us a text and we will, in the chat button, and we'll answer your question. She'll answer your question.
I don't see anything. So thank you guys for joining us for today. As we said, this is the fourth in our 4-part series for the EPI virtual series, and we will do this again next year. If you have requests for topics or suggestions, please feel free to let us know. This recording will be available on our SCI Academy by probably by the end of the day, Thursday. Today's Tuesday, right? Yeah, so just a couple of days it will be available, and you can access that for free via scinstitute.org, or just shoot us an email or Taz and we'll answer any questions. Alrighty, I think that's it. Melissa, anything else?
No, thank you, everybody. We're so glad that you were able to join us from the Southern California EPI chapters. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon. Take care.